Great.
Hi,
That's
everybody. Hi, Ray. Thank you for joining us on our last Psych Cafe for the semester. We're very honored to have Micaela speaking on a presentation that she did called The Past and the Present. So, Micaela, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Patricia. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. I am Micaela Varela. I'm in my fourth year in the Psychology and Social Intervention program. And I'm going to share with you today a presentation that I already presented at a conference back in July. It was a political psychology conference. So I hope you enjoy it. Of course, this work was done with my lab and my faculty advisors. So I also want to shout out to the Intergroup Conflict and Social Change Lab. So today I will start by talking about historical narratives. These are social representations that link the past to the present, and they are shaped by our mental representations, our understandings and interpretations of past events. And it happens to be that the progress narrative in the US, it's the main and most prevalent narrative. This is the belief that the United States is a nation of continual social, economic, and spatially racial progress. In other words, it states that significant and steady improvement has occurred in the relative status of Black people over the course of history. But when we see the data that is publicly, we understand that this is not quite true, and this is not what has been happening for everyone. And we then kind of question ourselves, where do we learn this progress narrative? And different studies have shown that the narrative of racial struggle in US history textbook is reductive, inaccurate, and simplistic. For example, history standards across the country ignore or oversimplify the coverage of slavery and enslaved people. They do the same when teaching the struggle for civil rights, reducing its lessons to two main figures, Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. Such representations omit the crucial role played by ordinary Black individuals and social movements. And furthermore, the historical representations, for example, in annual celebrations of Black History Month in schools, they tend to focus mainly on the movement victories, creating a very selective narrative of the past of this country. And the consequences are several. Evidence shows that this historical narrative tends to legitimize the status quo and suggests that the racial problem in the US ended. Specifically, studies have found that the progress narrative leads to an underestimation of present-day disparities among white and Black Americans. And this then creates the idea that it should not be rectified, and there's no need to support public policies that change this, or seeking a political solution. And it's not only related to what is omitted in history classes, but also how this can silence discussions outside of the classroom. Since 2021, an increasing number of books about race and racism have been banned in the US, including works on social justice movement like the Black Lives Matter, the BLM movement, and historical nonfiction. Such censorship has been described as reinforcing white supremacy and silencing narratives that challenge the status quo. This continues with the legal, institutional, and social structures that are rooted in the slavery era. But we also know that social movements use historical narratives to frame and diagnose these same roots, these same problems, and they draw attention for people on what to do, what are the tactics, the goals for social change. So if the prevailing narrative is legitimizing the status quo and also reducing support for policy and social change, then a very good question that we are wondering is what kind of historical narratives do the opposite? So what narratives mobilize for social change? And we have some answers. One example of this is the BLM movement here in the US. They have used social media, specifically Twitter, to mobilize people for racial justice and raise awareness about police violence. A study done by Danubin and colleagues found that the public discourse in social media actually shifts every time there's a BLM protest. And this is especially clear on the protest during or after the killing of George Floyd by the police in 2020. So there's a huge spike on the media participation, and people actually were Googling stuff, and they were Googling terms, they were Googling slogans. But one of the interesting things is that among the most important changes in public discourse, there were a lot of historical events and historical figures. So people were trying to find in Wikipedia and Twitter what was the history behind these names and these events. However, beyond this increased attention to history, we know little about the features of the historical narrative of Black liberation that is being shaped in and by the social movement for racial justice. So to address this question, I'm sharing a social media study that systematically examines how activist groups and organizations reference the historical events and figures on their Twitter accounts to understand the narratives and counter narratives that the larger public is exposed to. So we want to understand what's the content that is with these names, with these events, and what people use these for. So we have 3 research questions that pertain to the most prevalent historical events and figures. We also want to know how these change over time. And we want to know how the content itself, right? So what else is being mentioned in these groups? And to do so, we needed to first identify important organizations. So we started with the 2 main and most like popular, at least on Twitter, the Black Lives Matter account and the Black Lives Movement for Black Lives Coalition. And then we added and we search and try to identify different BLM chapters from different states and cities. And we also checked all the accounts that these 2 accounts were following. So by the end of this search, we had around 280 organizations. We excluded accounts that were individual, that were not from the US, and other things. So then what we did is that using Python, we downloaded all these tweets organizations in a 3-year period, right? So starting the day of George Floyd's murder on May 25 of 2020 and until June 16 of 2023, that was the day that the data was actually downloaded before Twitter, now X, closed the API for this type of research, right? So it was when it was still available and free. And our next step in trying to get to the historical pieces, imagine this was a bunch of Twitter data that has, it can have different topics, different things going on. So we wanted to identify the historical references. So to do this, we created a keyword dictionary using both a bottom-up approach selection and a top-down. So from the bottom up, we basically gathered the data. We checked the combinations of words. So for example, a 4-gram is created by 4 words. And we checked the most frequent, like 6,000 word combination to identify which ones were historical and which ones were not. In addition of this, knowing that we might have missed, we also selected from important sources such as the Equal Justice Initiative reports or other papers, other historical figures, important events, important laws, and incorporated them to the dictionary. So we created this dictionary of around 980 words. And then from this big data set of 3 years of tweets, we just selected the tweets that had one or more of these words, right? So this final data set is what we call the final historical tweet data set that contains 8,000 and a little bit more tweets. And this one is the one that we used for our analysis. So what did we find? So in this image, you can see the frequency of the tweets through this 3-time period. And we can see people sometimes talk more about history, sometimes they talk about less. It's really fluctuating, right? But we also wanted to know, well, are they talking more about history because they're tweeting more, or it's actually just related to that? So here we see that actually when we normalize both the like all the tweets and the historical tweets, there is some trends that show that yes, people are tweeting more, they talk more about history. But there are some cases where people actually are significantly talking more about historical things, not just tweeting more, right? So these are the blue spikes that you see here. And the first research question that we had was about the figures and the historical events. So we see that from the top 15 most frequent keywords, Juneteenth is by far the like most mentioned one. But also we have we condensed words that had the same stem. So slave, slavery, and slave was the second one. The same with Martin Luther King and the different versions that MLK can be kind of like mentioned. In addition, there are other words that might be related to these days, right? So Black History Month, or words that are related to violence or oppression, such as lynching, Jim Crow, or Emmett Till. But we also see some words related to the social movement, so civil rights movement or civil rights leader. And we see specific groups or activist leaders such as the Black Panther, Malcolm X, as well as Bell Hooks, John Lewis, and Mutulu Shakur. The later three were mentioned because, and we'll see, I'll show you in a bit, Bell Hooks and John Lewis happened to pass during this period. And there were also constant efforts to liberate Mutulu Shakur, who is a political prisoner. So now we have those ideas, but we can now see if actually there is a change in time on this most frequent keyword. So this is kind of confirming our ideas. We see that every June, Juneteenth spikes, and MLK spikes every January for his birthday and MLK Day celebration. And the same is true for Black History Month during February. John Lewis that passed away on July 2020, and Bell Hooks on December 2021. So we see that actually people are commenting a lot of the things that are going on today. But that doesn't tell us much about the content, right? So then it's our third research question. What are the features of these narratives? And to do this, we used structural topic modeling, which is often used in statistics and natural language processing. STM is a type of text analysis that identifies clusters of co-occurring words or latent topics. And it uses statistical model designed to reveal what are these abstract topics present in the data. So we combined, it acts almost like, well, it uses regression actually, and we, using the fits from different models and also qualitative interpretation, we compared different models and decided that a 20 topic model was the best fit for our purpose, and kept the messages and the significance of the messages, right? So this is a sneak peek of the different 20 topics, ordered by the proportion present in our data. And we can start seeing, for people that this is the first time that you see this type of analysis, that things that are similar are related to similar words, right? So we have, for example, March Washington Civil. We have King Legacy Honor. So we start seeing how these words are actually connected by these topics. And yeah, so because of time and 20 topics, it's a lot. What we did is that we examined these different 20 topics, as well as the most frequent and representative words that were on these topics, and we checked the tweets that were being stored in each topic, right? So from that, we started getting an answer to our third research question, and I'm going to present only 8 of these broad categories today that we categorize in these 2 even like broader topics, right? So the first one has to do with violence and oppression. And some of the things that are included in these types of tweets has to do with slavery, but also the modern extension of slavery, right? We also see a lot of organizations are sharing about past acts of racial violence and terror, such as lynching that we saw in the top keywords, for example. And there's different stories about analogies and continuity, things that today are pretty similar to injustices in the past, as well as injustices in the past that haven't changed and they still remain today. So some examples of this type of topics is, for example, the discussion about slavery and violence and modern extensions of these, such as this tweet that says, "Stop the execution of Corey Johnson. The death penalty is a modern day extension of lynching that magnifies the racism that permeates every aspect of our current criminal justice system." We have similar tweets that are reminding us about acts of racial and violence and terror, as well as what I was mentioning before, this continuation or this analogy, things that happen in the past that explain current injustices, such as this case of an anti-drug abuse act that continued creating like unfair sentences, or this one that I want to read about, a campaign for Emmett Till's family that mentions Caroline Bryan Dunham, who was the women that denounced Emmett Till. And they say, "She's an accomplice to the kidnapping and murder of our beloved Emmett Till. Her warrant was never served. Please read the petition. If you feel moved after reading it, join us and other relatives of Emmett Till. Sign the petition. Thank you." So they are actually connecting a past injustice to a continue present injustice that hasn't been addressed. And on the other topic that we also see a lot, we see a lot of resistance, we see calls for action, mobilization, but also a lot of honoring and memorialization of past leaders, right? So here, the idea that the research that I was mentioning, that MLK's still a big figure and it's still being celebrated and honored. And people talk a lot about his legacy. And in this case, they're celebrating his life and they are explaining how he remains an important figure for driving social change today. But we also see in this study that I think it's very interesting, we see other figures, right? So in this case, Black abolitionist women such as Harriet Tubman, Mary Ann Shadd, Sojourner Truth, Sarah Redmond, and other women that might not always be depicted in history textbooks, but we find them in the different organization tweets and calls and the information that they want to share with the broader public. And then a lot of the things that we see more linked to today is the call for action to attend to events, listen to podcasts. The organizations are constantly creating spaces to learn, to contest this narrative of progress. They are calling also for community healing and taking care of each other. So it is a space that they use to mobilize a lot. And the same is like this example about Juneteenth, right? It was one of the most mentioned keywords. And we see how they include a lot of teaching, what Juneteenth is, what you should do on a Juneteenth. Remembering that it was not long ago that it was established as an official like holiday. So these are some of the things that we are finding in our research, in our analysis, and that broadly trying to come for to finish with a discussion. They actually contest this idea that the nation is in progress and that we don't need to talk about racism anymore. These organizations are stating, they are saying that there's still violence, there's still oppression, they're still resistant to those oppression, and that they are also not recalling it only in the past, but also connecting how a lot of these injustices in the present stem from a past. So in this case, they call, for example, for reparations, for the liberation of political prisoners, or a lot of critiques to the current carceral system as a continuation of slavery. So it does seem like they have taken they continue this struggle and the long path of change toward liberation. And at the same time, they do this calling constantly to different actions that are for the community, by the community, but also that are trying to invite other people to join. And I link this especially to this idea of radical hope, that it's a theory by Mosley and colleagues, that they point out to these four paths to radical hope. The first one is understanding the history of oppression and the resistance to it. And we see how these organizations are constantly doing that, embracing ancestral pride, which we also saw with the memorialization and the honoring of different activists, envisioning equitable futures. I think this is also something that they are constantly pushing for, and something that they have been doing for a long time, which is pushing this purpose through commitment to social justice, which in this case they are doing, but they are also inviting other people that might not be participating, might not be engaging to do too, and like participate in all the different activities that they are organizing. So I want to thank my coworkers, Amy Shu, Obina, and my mentors, Dr. Rizarta Bilali and Dr. Michelle Tuali, my lab, and the Russell Sage Foundation and Spencer Foundation, which are part of being able to do this research. So I'm happy to hear comments, thoughts, happy to tell you more about what are the next steps too. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this, Michaela. This was fantastic. If anybody wants to unmute themselves and please ask questions, the floor is yours.
I have a small question. First of all, congratulations, Mika. This is a great project, really cool findings. I was just wondering a little bit about how you checked the specific tweets per topic, because I can imagine you have a lot of different tweets per topic. So did you conduct like a sampling of tweets, or how was that process?
Thank you, Jorge. So yeah, the way that the STM works, it's actually it's hard to explain, but it's easy to use. They have built this system where you get each tweet has is ranked by how representative is of each topic. So the part of the approach that we took is that we have been checking the most representative tweets for each topic to understand what the topic is. Of course, there are some tweets that might not be exactly that topic, but among all the things, we do see that each topic has the like necessary amount of tweets to be able to, oh, these are the things that they include. Still, I would say one of the reasons why we're going to do a mixed methods approach. So we have this first step that has been really useful, but we are also qualitatively using content coding to code them with like ourselves with arrays. We develop a code, and that's going to be much more on that specific level, right? So that's going to give us, I think, the nuances that this approach is not. I mean, it's great to analyze a big amount of tweets, but then for the details and the more like interesting parts, we're going to do it one by one qualitatively until we have a good like code scheme.
Thank you.
I have a question. I guess it's what are next steps, especially since Twitter and X doesn't exist as it used to? And like, are you gonna look at other platforms? Do you think it's even possible to get the amount of data that you got from there?
Thank you, Jordan. Yes, it's a great question. It was pretty stressful when we were downloading the data and they announced like it's going to close. So we were fighting with the code, trying to check if it worked. We were just in time. I think right now, and specifically thinking of how the change to X has impacted also a lot of organizers, a lot of organizations. There's even in academia, there's a lot of people that are moving into other platforms. So I would say that at least the stage of Twitter for this project, it's done. We are just going to keep these 3 years of tweets. We are going to analyze them qualitatively, but also actually Dr. Michelle Tuali right now, she's conducting a focus group. That's why she couldn't join. The other part of the project also has to do with conducting focus group with organizers in New York. And I think that's going to be more up to date, if you want to put it that way. Like we have these first insights of 2020 to 2023, and now we are in this stage of the focus groups that are also going to be the last part of the project. Thank you. So yeah, I'm thinking of like, well, and it's great also to have this type of data, because one of the things with the STM models is that they change and advance pretty fast. So maybe in 3 months, there will be like a new way of analyzing the data or a new package, and we will still have the data in case me or anyone else wants to conduct another type of analysis. And one of those that we actually consider is sentiment and emotion recognition, right? So are certain figures more related to positive emotions than negative emotions? Or how do the people react? For example, are there certain leaders that are more retweeted than others? How people like engage in those interactions? We also have the data to do that. So that's part of the things that we can continue doing with this project.
Well, we are a little over time, but I am more than happy to have been over time because this was extremely fascinating. If anybody has any questions, I know that Micaela has uploaded her email address. So, if you're kind of sitting here with a lot of information that you're just absorbing, no problem reaching out to her directly and keep this conversation going. But thank you so much for everybody attending. This was fantastic, a great way to end the semester. For all of our students and staff and faculty, wish you all the best of finals going forward. And thank you again for participating and joining us. Hope to see you next semester.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks.